Welcome to Rick's Scale Model Fix and another step-by-step video build. This time we're going to be looking at Airfix's fairly recent 1/72 scale Hunting Percival Jet Provost T3. There's no review of the kit on the site, but nonetheless we'll conduct a box top tour. So on the front we've got the lovely box art, as always with Airfix. A couple of marking options illustrated there. One side we've got some CAD photos, on the other we've got the two options included in the kit. So we've got Jet Provost T3 of number 2 Flying School, Royal Air Force, Goyden, Warwickshire in England, 1967, and a Jet Provost T3A of 1 Flying School, Royal Air Force, Linton on Ouse, North Yorkshire, England, 84. And we've got a brief synopsis of the type and its history. On the box end we have simply a replication of the digital box top artwork, and the kit number for this one is A02103. So as with any build that we commence, we always start off by having a look through the instruction booklet, and this is in Airfix's exploded view typical diagrams with clear colour callouts and parts breakdown. So the first page, steps 1 to 9, concentrate on getting the cockpit together. It is rather basic, but it is 72nd scale. So to this end we're going to add a bit of extra detail, and I'm going to use an etch set from Edard, which is SS566. This just has the basics. It's a zoom, so we've got the gauges and the instrument panel, a set of seat belts. Okay, so just off camera I've quickly removed the first section parts. So we're going to add B15 to the cockpit floor, which is A08, and we're going to add the bulkhead A09, and these are all black so they can be painted at the same time. So as always we talk about cleaning the parts up with a sprue attachment point, and sometimes I keep going on about it, but it's a good habit to be in. So we've got the cockpit floor there. So if you don't clean those areas up, it can come back to bite you later on in the build. Because if you have an attachment point this side and an attachment point that side that you don't fully clean up and remove, it actually increases the width of the part, and then when you come to join the fuselage sides together you're going to have an issue. So we're using Tamiya Quickset. I'm just quickly referring to the instruction booklet, and the centre console going in. So bear in mind that this is 72nd scale. There is quite some detail on these parts. Not much can be seen. I've built the model before, and once the seats are in there it does occupy the vast amount of the cockpit. And the instrument panel is quite noticeable as well. We'll add the Edard colour photo etched panel just for a bit of visual interest. So it's nice to see that Airfix have keyed these parts so that you can't get them the wrong way around. So they will only fit one way. So I think sometimes we lose sight of the more basic introductory or beginner level kits, and we always dive in for the latest state of the art ones, which is all good and well, but when we've got people returning to the hobby, or even new people trying the hobby for the first time, they're more likely to come across the Airfix kit such as this at the cheaper end of the pay scale. Hence the decision was taken to cover this on the channel. So we've got the parts for the ejector seats, and again, I'm going to say it, you've got to clean up the sprue attachment points. We're just going to cut these off with a knife. And the Airfix plastic is quite soft, so it's easy to work with. I'm just removing those with a knife handle, knife blade. It's a number 10A in a Swan Morton handle. The thing I like about the Swan Morton blades is obviously with them being designed for surgical reasons as well, but they're also a flat handle, so when you put them down on the bench they're not going to roll off the bench and stab you in the leg. So I'll just clean these seats up. There's not a lot to this kit, which is why I've chosen to add a little bit of extra detail. I'm not going to use all that Ed-Hard etch fret. It's just going to be the bits that are most visible in that cockpit. It's a delightful little build. Got some interesting colour schemes as well available on aftermarket decal sheets, which we shall have a look at. So we'll just make sure that we test fit the parts and make sure that they do join together as well as we can get them. A little bit fiddly in this small scale. And we will always work as well to the back or the inside of the parts where possible. Just got a bit of flash there. There's one seat pan, and we're just going to repeat that now with the other item. So here we have a fit issue. So I don't know if the camera can actually pick this up, but we'll have a go. But just on there's an ejector pin, and that has a raised edge to it, so we're just going to cut that off with a knife because that was actually stopping the two parts coming together. So we're not going to put pilots in, we're going to have the cockpit open. We've got the head box to add now to both seats along with the cushion. Now because we're going to add the Ed-Hard etch seat belts, we're going to have to sand this detail off. So using a Flory Models skinny stick, I'm just going to gently start sanding those belts away on the kit parts. They don't have to be removed totally and altogether, but just enough so that it doesn't affect the fitting of the etch parts when we come to use those. In fact, you could probably use the moulded in ones a little bit to your advantage to help line up the etched items and give them a little bit of sense of depth as well. Sometimes the etch parts can look a little bit 2D effect and a bit flat and not very realistic. And then finally we've got the instrument panel and the cockpits and the fuselage sides. So I'm just going to clean up these attachment points on the fuselage. And we'll get the first bit of paint on the model. So we're just going to quickly test fit this. It's not a massive kit by any means. It's just a nice, easy mojo restoring build. As you can see, it's only the size of my hand. But nonetheless, it's going to look quite nice when it's finished. So I'm just in the process of priming the inside of the cockpit on the fuselage sides. We're using AK microfiller and primer cut with a little bit of self-leveling thinners just to thin it down a bit. Nothing fancy, nothing special, just give something to the black to adhere to. And last but not least, those ejector seats. We'll build the remainder of these up as we progress. And we're just going to use Guns Tyre Black for the inside. I've not thinned it too much, just to aid coverage. So we've done a bit more work on the cockpit of our Jet Provost, and I've used the Edard instrument panel and some of the details for the ejector seats. So hopefully the camera can sort of pick those up. And the ejector seats are certainly looking better for the addition of those edge belts. So it's time to join the fuselage halves together now. So when I was doing some test fitting before, hence why the cockpit tub cemented in to that fuselage half, it was quite tight in there. So what I had to do was sand down the sides of the cockpit, the instrument panel and the bulkhead to get a really good fit. We need to add some nose weight up front. So I think what I'll do with that is I'll join the fuselage halves together and then pour some liquid gravity in through the open wheel well there, and stick some blue tack or something in to stop them rolling round. So we're just going to glue these fuselages together. So we're going to use Tamiya tape as to make sure everything is held in alignment. I'm going to work at it a section at a time. So we're just taking our Tamiya quickset, applying it to the panel line, allowing it capillary action to draw it along the joint, and then just keeping it in tightly together. So just do the same here at the nose. Hold it together while the glue bites. And a bit round the nose. So I'm just going to use some Tamiya tape to good effect there. So we're just going to check the fit of this wing section just to make sure the fuselage is at the correct width and we've not pulled anything in too tight with the tape. So it is a tight fit. I think maybe we've pulled the fuselage together somewhat. Nonetheless, it does go in, and that's a really tight joint. So that's a really good fit of that base plate there. So we may as well add some glue to that, because that is the next stage of the build. Just taking the time to make sure everything is square. And there's our fuselage halves together on our JP. So we'll let the glue dry for a bit and we'll move on with the build. So while the glue's nicely drying with the work we've just completed around the wings and the fuselage, we can now join the tail end. So we've got the tail planes to go in, we've got a little piece insert which is the jet pipe and then the rudder. So as you can see, the fit is perfect, so we'll just set about gluing those in place. Just a quick bit and quick set, bit of finger pressure just to make sure everything lines up, and when we come to our joint cleaning with that, that's all that's going to be needed. Here's a quick swipe round with a sanding stick. So we'll glue this rudder on. Just do it in a neutral position. And there we go. So we've got the tops of the wings to go on. So I've already removed one of those just to check the fit. And again, it's pretty good. So we're just going to let the glue properly dry now, probably overnight. And then when we come back, we'll look at adding the tops of the wings and the intakes to get the fuselage assembly pretty much boxed off. So we've now fitted the upper surface of the wings, and you may well wonder what on earth's going on with some cocktail sticks pushed into the intakes and everything. So the crocodile clips were to keep the tip tanks together, and the cocktail sticks, when the lower wing section was added, there's found to be a gap in the wing root, and this was because this part of plastic on the fuselage for the intake was actually pinched in. So just by pushing the cocktail stick into the opening, got the plastic to line up and close the gaps in the wing roots. So we can take some of this Tamiya tape off now and add the intakes. So the fit is generally quite good. Probably going to need just a touch of Mr. Surfacer to close a gap that we've got in the starboard wing root, but nothing really to worry about. So each intake is made up of two parts, and you've got the outer intake and the splitter plate, and they fit reasonably well. Probably going to need just a little bit of sanding just to blend everything in, but it's on the underneath, working for a perfect finish on the top side. So I've done the port one, so we're just going to do the starboard one. So again, we're cutting off these sprue attachment points. Making sure everything is as the manufacturer intended once they've been removed from the sprues. And then we're going to just carry out a test fit just to make sure everything does line up, which it does. So I prefer to glue the intake together first before offering it up to the fuselage, and what that meant is I can adjust the fit if need be by sanding the back side of the splitter plate to make sure it just slides in place with no problems, like that. So again, just a little bit of tweaking. It's wanting to push out slightly there, so I might just sand this rear surface down a little bit. Still not quite there, so going back to our skinny, there is a little step there. Try and remove that, and the fit is perfect, it just slides in Bit of an application of Tenaya extra thin, push in place, and the job's a good one. So with the addition of that intake, that now concludes the construction phase of the build. So it's really important now to leave the model to dry, so let the glue dry properly. If you start working on the seams too soon, then the plastic's still soft from where the glue's melted the contact edges, and you can also make more work for yourself, because what's going to happen is as this glue dries properly, it's going to shrink the plastic back down, and you're going to end up with ghost seams visible under your paintwork. So it's just worth leaving it 24-48 hours before you do any of that rectification work. So the model's been left for a while now for this glue to dry. I've made a start cleaning up all the joints. So I've worked on the spine, the nose. The black line is just a paint that's squeezed out with the glue. I've worked those intakes in, so they're a nice fit. We might just need some Mr. Surfacer, so we'll talk about that in a second, just to sort of take care of some of the smaller gaps. So we're just going to work on the seam at the underneath. So I find it's best to use a good brand of sanding stick or sponge, as this is. So these are Flory models, and this is the medium dual sander, so you've got a rougher surface on one side and then a sponge on the other. And we're just going to work on this seam. So what we're going to do is just, because the Airfix plastic's quite soft, we don't want too coarse a grit. It's just going to cause too much damage for us to then polish out. And we're just going to take care of this centre seam. So all we're going to do is just gently work over the seam, and this is where the sponge part is a benefit, because it doesn't let you create a flat spot. It just moulds itself to the contour that you're sanding, and in no time at all the joint that the glue made has now disappeared. That's not it. So we've got some damage there where there was a sprue attachment point, and some damage here, so these will just need a little bit more work, and even a spot of filler. So we'll just carry on with that. There's nothing worse walking around a model show or looking in the competitions at model shows and seeing somebody that's finished a model with some absolutely brilliant weathering and painting, only to note that we've got gaps in the leading edges of the wings, or the panel lines don't go right round the wings. So it's worth spending some time just getting things right. It's also a benefit for the primer stages, because once you start putting primer on the model, you're getting to have a look at what the end result's going to be, and the paint job is only as good as the preparation that goes into that paint job. So if you've got problems in the surface of your model, you're going to amplify those when you put paint on. Certainly if you're using gloss or a natural metal or a silver. Now the Airfix plastic does make it really easy, so we have still got a slight ridge there, so we'll see what that looks like under primer. I don't know whether it's just me, but it feels as though there's a slight ridge. We might need a spot of primer on there. So when do we fill and when do we use other products? So I always try and get the build together with the least amount of work to then do. So looking at the kit we've got a small indentation there and a small indentation there, and that's where the sprue attachment points were. So I've probably just caught the plastic a little bit while I've been removing it with the knife. Overall the fit's really good. We've got no issues with the leading edges of the wings, no issues with the tip tanks or the trailing edges of the wing. Just noticed a bit there though. But we do have a slight gap in the wing root on the port side. We have a slight gap at the tail, and then we need to deal with these. So there's a couple of products we can use. So Mr. Surfacer, this is a well-used bottle. This is Mr. Surfacer 500. And this is like a liquid putty. And it can be applied into the gap or the void, like so. Just to fill the gap up. And now this shrinks like mad when it dries, so it is only really suitable for small areas. So you certainly wouldn't think about filling those divots from the sprue attachment points with it, but we have got a few little gaps around the model that we can use this to good effect. And that's now going to be left to dry. Another one that we're going to use is melted kit sprue. So we've cut off the waste runners, we've cut them up into bits, and we've popped them into half a bottle of Tamiya liquid cement, which then melts them, and this forms a very liquidy paste. I don't know if you can actually sort of see the consistency of that. So this is basically melted plastic. So we're just going to put a dab in there and a dab there. It does make little balls, which makes it easier to sand. The downside with this one, it does take a little while to dry, so you can't work on this straight away. It's going to have to dry. But the benefits of this, it's plastic, so it will sand the same as the surrounding kit plastic. You can rescribe it, whereas some of the fillers, if you run a scriber through filler, it'll just rake it out, cause a rough line. We do have a little bit there, and that's pretty much it. So then, once that filler's dried, there's various methods we can use to remove it. So the sprue glue, if you like, will just be sanded with that Flooring Models sander, where the Mr. Surfacer will be removed with a cotton bud dipped in IPA. So that concludes part 1, which was the construction phase. So thank you for following. Please subscribe, and there'll be more to come. So until next time, please look after yourselves, stay well, and take care.